Well, John, let's first talk about Quinton Dunbar. What do you make of that situation? What's the latest?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, in 50 years of covering this league, it's one of the strangest things I've ever seen. I mean, you come out, you see what the story is, and it's like, this is almost like Aaron Hernandez, a comparison like that. Now it turns out that we don't know exactly what did happen, but I had a good 15-minute conversation with his attorney, Michael Grieco, and Michael Grieco has 5 affidavits of the 5 people who claimed what happened, and they're all taking it back. I mean, the 4 victims said that Quinton Dunbar didn't do anything. And then the one person that was kind of the neutral person, he took back what he said in a sworn statement. And so it seems to be a little bit of a distance on, the relationship with DeAndre Baker and Quinton Dunbar. And even on the idea that the 2 of them lost $70,000 2 nights before in gambling, he says that's completely erroneous involving Dunbar. So you kind of get the idea. First, the police have to, find a way to get the 5 people to come back and either take back what they said. But if you got the victims not being victims and now giving sworn affidavits that they'll stand up to, then all of a sudden Quinton Dunbar is probably going to be exonerated.
When did you talk to Grieco?
I talked to him today on radio, Monday at 11 o'clock. And so it went real well because I've talked to Grieco before. He's one of the most prominent attorneys in Miami, and he's been a lot of sports clients. And so he was very thorough, because what he ended up doing is that it's not just that they created these things, he had the 5 people with the affidavits go to his office and then swear and get those done. So what we don't know is what really did happen, but what now is being claimed, at least from Grieco, is the fact that, hey, Quinton Dunbar was not involved in this thing. Was he there? Yes. You saw the apology that he put out, and he says, I've got to make sure that I associate with better people and try to at least clean that up, which is something he has to do, but he has no past criminal record, none whatsoever. Sure, there's 20 violations of traffic type of things, driving, but there's a lot of those around, particularly around the DC area, and I talked to some people back in DC. He's not like the only one that has more than 10, so you don't read too much into that.
Wow, like parking tickets and things like that?
Well, I remember just going to Duquesne University. It's like, I think I had like 13. So, I mean, obviously they weren't giving parking tickets at Redskin Park. That wasn't happening, but there may be some other areas that he was involved with, and maybe, driving on some of the roads a little too fast. That I don't know.
All right, lastly with Dunbar, hypothetically, if this all goes by the wayside and he just has a cloud over his name but nothing else, the Seahawks keep him?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, because, it was interesting because, remember, this all came out after he did the interviews on Zoom with all the reporters. And so after this came out, after the fact, they called him up and said, what is this? He said, it's no big deal. Because he says, that's not, and again, taking the tack that his attorney has, that he did nothing wrong. So I guess he was surprised. Now again, we just don't know, and we'll have to have the police in Miramar sort it out and finally get us the idea of what happened and what didn't happen. But I think if this is the case, they'll stand by him, because if he did nothing wrong, and the league can't do anything, and the team could do something, but I don't think they will. But naturally, once he gets to town, now again, if this drags out, he's not allowed to leave the state of Florida. Although I guess even Michael Grieco said that if he needed to go someplace, that he could be allowed to go. But right now, he's kind of mandated to stay in Florida. But if there's no charge that's going to stay, then he's going to be fine.
Doesn't it feel like it's going to drag out?
I was even saying this, I got into it with Dave Grosby and that. It's like, aren't there more important things? If the victims aren't victims, right, and they're taking back what they said. Now, again, do you want to pursue them for perjury? I guess you could do that if you're going to be the police down there. But is there more important things? Because again, on Sunday, the prosecutor was trying to say, well, maybe they took back what they were saying because of either terroristic threats, maybe that they were being paid off, those type of things. And of course, I know that Michael Grieco came back and he says, hey, could have been they were trying to fleece the clients, Baker and Dunbar. Nobody knows. All we know is that one side said one thing one day, and the same side came back and took it all back in sworn statements, which is kind of weird, but hey, it's one of the weirdest stories I've covered in 50 years.
How about the NFL and the situation right now? The not knowing has got to be tough for someone like you that covers it, day in and day out.
Yeah, it is, because again, I mean, the good part is there's enough action going on. There's plenty to talk about. That's no problem. I mean, you have free agency, you still have, different things. Now, of course, we're in the arrest period, because now it starts to sound like July, because you know what happens when all the players are off, and now they're starting to get out of the stay at home and now getting themselves in trouble, because we went 4 months up until April and there wasn't a single arrest, not one. Now we have 4 involving guns in a matter of 4 days. That's not good. And so now the players have to watch what they do, even though, again, they should stay at home. But that supposed gambling party, which is supposedly dice, I think it had 15 to 20 people that were involved. You wonder what happened to the other 10 to 15 people. They must have left at some point and not been reached by police. And then you've got incidents now where you have it was I think a poker game that one of the Redskins wide receiver Cody Latimer had, and he ended up taking a gun and shooting it twice. That's going to be hard not to stand up and not. I think they can probably prove that because you can show where the bullets are and all that stuff. That's going to be tough on him. But it's just now that strange time. But there's enough stuff to talk about. And hey, at least it's like 4 days we didn't talk about Jadeveon Clowney.
I won't even ask you about Clowney, but I will ask you about the NFL schedule, and it seems like they're going to play. They're always going to figure something out, but it feels like they have like 5 contingency plans ready to go. If looking at your crystal ball, what would you see happening?
What I can see happening is that if everything goes as far as the right start for the season, that I can't say that every team's going to be in their stadium, because we know Seattle's among 10 teams that may not be able to play in their stadium. We know there's not going to be pretty much hardly any crowds at all. If there's going to be any crowds in the stands, it's going to be 25%, no more than that. But that's, I think, in question right now. But you can see how they can go is that first you try to have the first week. If that's when things start to go bad as far as the second wave, you can cancel week 3 and 4 because you can get the first 2 weeks in. 3 and 4 have non-division games, and you look at week 2, they've strategically taken it so they can take teams with the bye weeks and move those games back. It's also possible, if necessary, they can move the schedule back a month if they can find out at the beginning of September if there's going to be any problems with second wave or anything of that nature. So there's enough flexibility that they could have a 14-game schedule, a 16-game schedule on time, or they could have a 12-game schedule. And if they do have to move things back, they already know they can have the Super Bowl February 28th. So I think they built in enough contingencies. And what helped is that in 2011, they had the lockout. So they had no off-season program, and they had to come up with schedule formulas because they didn't know if the schedule was going to work because they didn't know when the lockout was going to end. So they built some of those formulas into this and at least maintained, instead of just having out-of-conference games in the first month of the season, they had good games mixed in.
So looking ahead, you think they're going to start on time?
I think so, yeah. In fact, it helped on Monday that Governor Cuomo in New York, basically said they want to help the teams. They want the baseball teams to help, and it's like if they need help. So, like for example, if New Jersey is having a tough time and New Jersey's working well with New York, maybe what they can do is take the football games and move them to Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium. I think there's flexibility to do things like that. So, as long as everybody can work together, then I think you can get the games off. Because right now, it still doesn't look good for having fans in the stands, but I still think it looks good to be able to get the season off started. Hey, so far, people didn't want free agency to start on time. It did. They had 171 guys sign in unrestricted free agency. That's an NFL record. You saw that the draft came off smoothly. And so far, so good. Now it's a matter of getting these virtual meetings going so at least the teams somewhat have a chance to prepare.
What about the Seahawks when you look at their backup quarterback situation with Geno Smith and now Anthony Gordon in there as well? What do you make of that backup situation?
I like it. I mean, again, everybody was trying to get Jameis Winston and Cam Newton in, and I thought that would be mistakes. Because the mistakes would be you're bringing in too big of a profile on a Russell Wilson team, and you don't want to take away the authority of Russell Wilson. Like, for example, if you bring in Cam Newton, then you're going to have a lot of the younger players that were like 14 or so when Cam came into the league thinking, oh, I love Cam Newton. I like him better than Russell Wilson, when some of them don't even know Russell Wilson. So I thought that would have been bad. And Jameis Winston, again, another too big of a presence. And so that's why Geno Smith was the perfect fit. He's been here. He knows the system, particularly with no offseason program. The more players that know the system and can come back in, the better it is. I don't think it was any accident on defense that two of their signings were guys who were on this team. Bruce Irvin, who's played linebacker and defensive end, and he knows the system here. Same thing with Benson Mayowa. So I think that's why you want to have as many guys that you don't have to teach, just kind of relearn.
You bring up Irvin, and I think about the defense. The cap has come down a little bit. At least their cap space has come down a little bit. What do you think the Seahawks will do moving forward? Do you think there's another move they're going to make?
Yeah, I could see 3. I think one would be maybe a veteran running back at the minimum salary. That could be Carlos Hyde, maybe a long shot C.J. Prosise, maybe it could be Devontae Freeman. I think one of those options. They need a veteran defensive tackle. It can be a run stopper. Now, I think Damon Harrison has talked about retirement, but he would be a perfect fit to come in at the right price because they're almost at the stage, with a little less than $16 million of the cap. $8 million is going to be tied up in the rookie pool, and they have to make more adjustments because of the way the new CBA is, that they have to, save a little bit more. They're almost at the stage when they sign somebody, they may have to let somebody go at some point, but they're not at that point yet, but it's still getting close. And so, I say running back, defensive tackle, and maybe one receiver, and I think it's one. If Josh Gordon can get reinstated, I think they'd like to have him back because at least, he can compete with Philip Dorsett and others for the number 3 receiver position.
You think Gordon would get reinstated?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, the problem that all the guys who are on suspension are going through right now is that the league's not even talking to them, not even doing anything because there's no urgency. I mean, it's not like they're missing anything. I mean, it's like, oh, you may be missing a virtual meeting on Zoom, but that you can handle that. And so, it's the same thing with Randy Gregory. It's the same thing, with Josh Gordon. It's the same thing with Alden Smith, who signed with the Dallas Cowboys. They just have to wait. And most likely, they're not going to get to those cases before July. So again, Gordon was able to get his, somewhere before the start of, around the beginning of training camp. So I think in July he'll find out if he can come back. And I don't see any reason, as long as he's behaved, that he can come back. I think he will.
Running back situation didn't really improve too much in the offseason. I feel like we're kind of where we were before the draft even started, even though they got a DJ Dallas to come in. Yeah,
of course, and DJ's never done DJ work, by the way. Just I asked him about that. He did confirm that. He says he's been around DJs, particularly being at the University of Miami. I think they're in okay shape because they still have Travis Homer, who did a good job last year. They still anticipate everything's going to be fine with Chris Carson. Rashad Penny is probably going to be week 6 or week 7, so that's going to take some time. That's why it wouldn't be a bad idea to get a Carlos Hyde if he's willing to do the minimum salary, because he could come in there as a veteran just if needed, because it's one of those things where you can get by with the running back group, but if something goes wrong, maybe with Carson, you want to have one option. That's why I think a Hyde could be a good option.
What about Marshawn Lynch? Is that just an absolute reach?
No, I think he would be the third choice. Because one, he'll come in for the minimum because he saved every dollar he's made in his NFL career. So it's like, and he's got family up here and everything else. So I think that he'd be the third option. But then the idea of Hyde or Freeman, they're younger backs. And if you're bringing in Marshawn Lynch, he's only going to be doing a couple specific things: short yardage and goal line. Because at this age and where his speed is now, he's not going to be able to average more than like 3.2 to 3.4 yards a carry, where you're going to get more out of Freeman, you're going to get more out of Hyde if necessary. So he's, I think, the third option.
Any other things about the Seahawks that concern you, or some of the hot topics you've been dealing with in the offseason?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see the transition, at what they're going to do. There's the chance right now, this may sound strange, that in a year where you don't have an offseason program for the rookies, they could have 3 rookies start. Because I think there's a decent chance that you can see Jordan Brooks come in on the weak side, not the strong side, compete against Cody Barton, and maybe see if he can beat Cody Barton out for that job, because he can give you great speed. That's something they want to do. They want to get faster in the defense. Then, of course, I think they take KJ Wright and move him over to the strong side, and he'll start there. So I think that's one that I think is intriguing. Then you can have Darrell Taylor. They think there's a chance that he could compete for the starting job, even though, because one of the reasons they drafted him over others is he's a little bit more advanced, a little bit more experienced, and maybe more NFL ready than some of the other guys. So I can see that happen. And that Damian Lewis is going to be able to start because he's basically DJ Fluker, only younger. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful. So I can see the first 3 guys starting.
All right, my NFL guy. Anything else?
Well, one thing I was curious where you mentioned linebackers.
Yeah.
I mean, what about Michael Kendricks? I haven't heard much about him.
Yeah, Kendricks, I think, coming off the knee injury and seeing their overload, because right now you can't even see if Shaquem Griffin's going to make the team. And if that's going to be the case, because he's a good special teams player, where's Kendricks is going to fit in? It's just the unfortunate thing that, hey, you have, you try to come back from an injury, and nobody can give him any tests or anything like that because physicians can't do anything. So I think, unfortunately, Kendricks won't be back.
It's interesting to bring up Shaquem, though. I mean,
yeah.
They are loading up at it seems like they've got a lot of young guys at that position that'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like they want to get younger. They want to get faster because they realized last year there wasn't enough speed out there. The other thing that's going to be interesting, can they find a way?
Hold that thought. What is this? A Cox gas airplane up?
God.
What are we in the 80s?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, they've got to find a way to get younger and faster, and I think they've got to see if there's a way, I don't know if they can, to get Marquise Blair on the field. I think that, if Dunbar is indeed going to be back and be full service, then I think they're going to be in good shape there, because what they can do is that if necessary, see if Blair can be, a slot cornerback. They can maybe see if, Ugo Amadi's ready to take over, or they can take Quinton Dunbar when they go 3 corners and put him in the slot. So they have so many different options right now.
I just want to ask you one more thing about the training camps or the VMAC and some of these facilities that were supposed to open up this week to individual workouts. What does that mean for teams? Like, what does it mean for the Seahawks?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It means, and the reason is they're not going to be open for workouts. The only people that can go into the facility is that you can maybe have a maximum of 75 people going in there, and most of them are just going to be office workers. They're going to be the ones that are going to be, maybe ticket people. I don't think front office people. No coaches can be there. The only players can be there. Players coming back from rehab from injuries, and so they can get some treatment. But there's no competitive edge right now unless you have 30 guys that are coming back from injury, and they're not going to be coached. They're not going to be able to do anything other than do their rehab.
Okay, so this doesn't mean guys can come in and have a few guys in the weight room working out.
No.
And throw
Absolutely
the football?
not. And the only ones that can work out in the weight room are the guys that are coming back on rehab from injuries. That's the only ones, and they have to. I'm sure that the league has the list of players that they're going to have, and so that means that. And again, you can only have 75, and most teams that are allowed. Now, again, this team's not allowed. They're one of the 10 teams that can't bring them in right now because everything's still stay at home. In the Californias, the New York teams, not going to be able to do anything. But those that are still out there, that can do it, it's basically just rehabs, and that's about it.
All right, John, thanks a lot. We appreciate your time as always.
Good to see you. I'll be watching you when you get back to your house.